Welcome to the Women and Wealth podcast with Esther Szabo. Esther is a respected leader in the field of personal financial advice with over 25 years of experience. After going through her own significant and challenging life-changing events, she overcame fear and self-doubt to launch her own successful advisory firm. Now Esther is ready to share her practical and personal experiences to help other women clear their hurdles and brave life's transitions. In this way, she inspires women to lead fulfilling and confident lives.
Hello and welcome to Women and Wealth with Esther Szabo from Gates Pass Advisors. Good morning, Esther. How are you?
Well, it's afternoon here, and
Wow.
I'm doing well.
Well, there you go. Then it must be afternoon where I'm at, too, because I'm ahead of you.
That's right. We normally record in the morning, but...
She called me on the carpet, everybody. That's it. Esther's just set me straight. I don't even know what time it is. Anyway, well, I'm glad it's afternoon.
None of us, we're all having a hard time even figuring out what day. So the fact that we're both here functioning and speaking is wonderful.
Absolutely. I do believe somebody said it yesterday while I was on a webinar that every day is now Blur's Day. It's Blur's Day. We're not sure. It's a day that ends in Y, and we're just going to keep going. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes, keeping going is important.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about what do we do when we don't know what to do.
What do we do when we don't know what to do?
Yep. We're recording this. It's towards the end of June.
Mm-hmm.
And the month of June is always challenging for me because it's the anniversary month of my late husband's passing and the whole ordeal that led to that. And so this time, 6 years ago, in June, early June, he went into cardiac arrest while we were on vacation in Moscow, Russia.
Wow.
Many know some of this story.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to share it in its full entirety just because there's so many little pieces, but I'm going to share a bit more about it today.
All right.
And when this happened, it happened on June 9th, and we were supposed to return home from Russia on June 13th, but we obviously couldn't come home because of his condition. And no one could tell me when we could. The doctors couldn't. I knew after we got back was he had suffered a punctured lung getting CPR, but I didn't understand that that's what had happened. All I knew was that we couldn't fly. And I was in this foreign land, no one I knew. I didn't know where I would stay after our official days were over. I didn't know if he was really getting good care or not. I had to completely put myself in somebody else's hands. Financially, the hospital in Moscow, they required that I give them a credit card until the insurance got settled and set up. So they started charging that credit card $10,000 a day.
Oh, my gosh.
I had to keep monitoring it, and you get it within 3 days. And 3 days after this event happened, I had a $30,000 balance on my credit card, and I didn't know when I'd be home. And obviously, I needed that credit card. Thankfully, I had two with me, so I had two limits. But still, I had to keep my head on straight because I had to navigate all this stuff. And I didn't know when it would be over. I had false starts of when we could come home. On Friday, June 20th, we were told by the medical staff, okay, you're good. You can medevac home. And I thought, great. I thought we'd leave the next day. That would be on a plane. And then I was told, no, you can't leave because your visas have expired and you need visas to get out of the country. So that put me back in touch with the embassy, and somebody came to the clinic where I was staying. It was not where David was getting care. It was across town. But somebody came to the clinic from the embassy, and that was on Sunday, and spent all day preparing the documentation. And I found out that we were able to fly Tuesday. Monday, I was told the medevac plane is coming to you from the United States. Tuesday, it'll pick you guys up and take you home. I, again, assumed, okay, we're leaving at 7 in the morning. We're going to leave early. I was told to be at the hospital where he was at 6:30 in the morning on that Tuesday. And there was just delays upon delays upon delays. I felt like I would never, ever get on that plane. I arrived to the airport. We went separately because he went in an ambulance. I went in a car. I had to let him go off to the airport in the ambulance. And I stayed at the hospital because my ride wasn't there. And they couldn't keep they needed power for the ambulance to keep running all the equipment to keep him on the ventilator, et cetera. So I said, just go to the airport. I'll catch up with you. And I kind of had my fingers crossed, like, I hope I'll catch up with you.
Yeah.
But it was quite an ordeal. And finally, we were able to take off late on Tuesday afternoon. And we arrived back to the United States very late. It was a 24-hour flight with 4 stops because these are small planes and they have to refuel.
Wow.
And, now I can stand here and say, okay, I was there for, if somebody had told me June 9th when he was taken away in the ambulance, you will be able to go home 2 weeks from tomorrow, that would have been an entirely different experience than not knowing or having any idea.
Yeah.
Let alone if they had said, you'll be going home 2 weeks from tomorrow. You will get great care while you're here. You'll have some bumps, but there will be people to help you every step of the way. You just have to keep doing X, Y, and Z, which was I came back to principles in my life that had worked for me years, through before this trip. Mm-hmm. But if I'd been given all these directions ahead, okay, that's one thing. But we all find ourselves in places in life that are just, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
This was a time that, as I look back, it was filled with uncertainty, with anguish, with regret, with sadness, with grief, with fear. I had fear of financial devastation. I had fear that I was not in control, that decisions were taken from me. I had fear I didn't understand what was going on, and that with that, I'd be taken advantage of. All things that are understandable. And I had to come back each day to principles in my life that had worked for me for many years, which was to have a 24-hour plan for that day when I woke up, even if it took me, which it did. It sometimes took me an hour or two just to get out of bed, but to have a plan for that day, to ask for the help I needed, and to keep a routine. And it's so similar to what we're all walking through right now. We're moving into the second half of 2020. It's been a very different year than any of us would have expected. We have continued uncertainty collectively. Reopening is phasing in across the country, and many of us are eager to begin meeting again publicly to support the businesses, the restaurants, the shops. And businesses are struggling to know whether to stay open or close or do something in between, as the virus is appearing to accelerate along with this reopening. Mm-hmm. We have civil unrest going on in the country. We collectively, none of us know how long all of this will go on. We will be able to look back at all of this sometime in the future and see how it all resolved. But right now, it's a really uncertain time.
Yeah, and Esther, the problem I see is that we have so many people talking in our ears, right? And they're saying so many different things. I just was speaking to a gentleman last night. He's a friend of mine, and we were talking about how he's doing, how his family's doing, and he said, most of my family thinks I'm overreacting. And I mean, I don't go anywhere. Eric, I don't go anywhere. I stay in my house. If I go outside, I wear a mask all the time. And the difference is, number one, he's older, but his concern is he's got a son with special needs who is highly susceptible, has lung issues, breathing issues already. He is not going to take a chance. So he is locking himself and his son and his wife in their home as though the zombie apocalypse is outside. I mean, looking through the window, not doing anything. And that's on the very, very far end of the spectrum, but he's doing it to protect his son. And by all means, he needs to. He's not going to take any chances. But you have a lot of the country saying, oh, we're ready to reopen. Business is going to be as usual and so on and so forth. And so many of us just don't believe that. I personally don't. I agree with you that the it seems to be accelerating as we're reopening, and that's scary for me because I have elderly parents, and yeah, just so many things.
Yeah, it is. It's what the challenge is right now. Who do you believe?
Mm-hmm.
Plus, what do you want to do and wish you could do? Versus engaging the basically sensible parent part of the brain, rather than kid who wants to go out and play.
Yeah, exactly.
And putting that online and saying what is the right thing for my family, my coworkers, my colleagues in this. It's hard. I don't think, none of us, we all wear masks, and I will say, this is, not the best thing. I will say, gosh, masks are annoying because they mess up my hair every time.
Yeah, my beard never looks the same afterwards. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. But your hair would. But and they're not comfortable, and they steam up our glasses, and gosh, it's frustrating and irritating. And then you go, but this isn't about me. It's about being of service to those around me. My mom is staying with us now. She's 96, and just it's about what's the right thing to do for the people around us.
Yes.
And also not having shame about that, and not being shamed into thinking, well, that's dumb.
Exactly.
It's like, no, this is critical, because if we have a second wave, we might have a second wave. If we may or may not have a vaccine, we may or may not have a vaccine that's, works for all populations, or we may have a vaccine, but it has side effects. All of these are risks that we're dealing with and walking through. And if somebody could tell us right now, you know what, this will be resolved by February of 2021, something like that. I'm pulling that out of a hat. But then that would be a whole lot easier for our minds to wrap around than this ongoing uncertainty.
Yeah.
I get it. It's hard. And in the work that I do of financial planning and portfolio management and allocation, we get asked this a lot. How do we invest? What are we doing? We basically boil it down. There's 3 primary areas available to most investors, which are stocks, bonds, and cash. And within stocks and bonds, there's various sub-asset classes. But to keep this general, with stocks, what we know is we went through quite a drop in the first quarter and quite a recovery even before the first quarter ended and into the second quarter. Stocks right now are priced quite high. They have significantly higher valuations than even 12 months ago before any of this happened. The S&P 500 is down about 6% as of the day of this recording. Over the past 52 weeks, it's returned about 5%. The top stocks in the S&P 500 include names maybe you're familiar with: Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Alphabet, which is Google, and Johnson & Johnson. So, Eric, I'm going to ask you that during the pandemic, have you used any of these companies?
Oh, yeah, a couple of them for sure. Yeah.
I mean, they're ones that we're relying upon. The NASDAQ year-to-date is up over 10%, and past 52 weeks up 25%. And it passed in June 10,000 for the first time ever. The NASDAQ is heavily allocated towards these same stocks. Although we'll add in Intel, NVIDIA, and Netflix. All of these have been key during this pandemic to keeping us connected to purchasing, ordering, doing business. So that's
insane,
partly
right? And entertained. I mean, Netflix. Yes, I subscribe to Netflix, and I love it. Because when I don't want to watch the news anymore, which that's quite often because of what the news tells me, it's time to get on Netflix and just kind of do something that's completely mind-numbing and fun.
Yeah, with my mom being here, we were singing songs just around the table the other night from Oklahoma, and I thought, well, let's just watch Oklahoma, and it's amazing. You can just pull it off of, I think, Amazon Prime, and there we're watching Oklahoma.
That's great.
P.S. Talk about a movie that has a very thin plot, but okay. Fun to watch.
But there's lots of singing, so there you go. Yeah.
So we watched part of it last night. We'll watch the rest tonight. And but just ways to gather around together. How many of us are gathering around screens for entertainment, for work, for business. So, but we know that the market is priced high. And if any of these come to bear, such as a second wave of the virus, I mean, it's priced that if something like this were to happen, we'd see a tumble again, most likely. So where do you go? Do you go to cash? Do you reduce your equity allocation? Do you go to bonds because bonds equal safety? Well, the thing with bonds is, and again, there's sub-asset classes to bonds, but the 10-year Treasury yield is below 0.7% right now. So to put that into numbers, if you needed an extra $3,000 a month to supplement Social Security income in retirement, you'd have to invest $5 million into a 10-year Treasury bond to get there. I mean, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, let me get my checkbook real quick.
Yeah.
Not happening.
And I mean, for some people, very, very wealthy people who could just sit there with that, okay, and they don't perhaps mind that after they've paid taxes and inflation, they're at a negative return just because they know, okay, I'll look at my account and it'll still say I'm going to get $5 million back in 10 years, and that's fine. But for most people, it's not going to provide, well, for anybody, it's not going to provide anything in terms of return if we take out taxes and inflation. Bonds are there for ballast to keep allowing one to have the stock allocation that one has, which is for the long-term future. And bonds are something that can provide that ballast, can be a backup to cash needs, can keep providing even a slim amount of returns during difficult times. And then the other is cash. And cash is there to pay the bills, to give us reserves. It doesn't give us anything in terms of return. It does let us look at our account and see that same number, regardless of what happens in the stock or bond market. And right now, there's record amounts of cash on the sideline as people moved over there out of fear and are waiting for things to look better. And recently, in the past in the past month, I've spoken to 4 different women who have been going through really challenging times. For 2 of them, their husbands had passed away during this pandemic, not of coronavirus, but had passed away. One of them had lost her job, and another was just wondering how she was going to pay her bills, didn't have work, had tried for a job, didn't get it. And out of these 4, there's one who is going to navigate through this okay because there were contingency plans in place. I certainly did not have a plan to end up in Russia in this scary situation, but I have and had contingency plans in place to help navigate through that and to come home. And, for the first time, for the first time ever, because I knew my husband wasn't 100% well, we had bought travel insurance. Never had done that before. That's a contingency plan.
Yeah.
The woman who'd lost her job and has the contingency plan, she is a client of ours. And we'd been planning for something like this for quite some time, just to say, let's look at that scenario. What do we need in place? And had allocated her portfolio and her reserves accordingly. And this is the benefit of cash. Cash should not be there as a springboard for speculation into the stock market. It's there for reserves, for unforeseen times. These reserves can help protect us during the down times and help us pay our bills while we're sorting out what's our next step. It can also be there for when things reopen or when we will have an opportunity to purchase again. If one is in a position to go and purchase that next car or buy that trip when one is able to feel comfortable with it, there may be some good opportunities as things open up and as one is comfortable. So it's there for opportunities as well as reserves. There is no great one investment. That's the thing. We as advisors know all of this well of what's going on. We know the stock market is very highly valued right now. We know that bond yields are very low. And if one wants to get more return out of one's bond portfolio, one has to take on more risk. And we know that cash yields are basically zero, but what cash is there for. And we go back all the time to 3 principles of investing, and that is ones that my listeners are very familiar with, and you are too, which is asset allocation, diversification, and have a plan.
Absolutely.
The plan is about risk mitigation and about creating contingencies so that when something happens, it's hard. The one who lost her job was a client. It's not to say that she's skipping merrily each day. It's very difficult. It was something that mattered to her a lot. However, she's not worried about how to pay the bills in June, July, August, and September. There's place for that. She's got that covered while she adjusts to this change.
Yeah.
So in times of uncertainty, as I've discussed on other podcasts, what do we want to do? We want to solve it. We want to fix it. The mind seeks to do that because its goal is it's trying to make us safe. And as I've discussed, a common thing that investors do to make themselves feel safe is to move to cash. Or what is not unusual that happens is that when there is all this cash, people think, okay, I'm going to pay off debt. That will help me feel safe. I'm going to pay off the mortgage. I'm going to pay off the credit cards. I'm going to pay off the car. I'm going to pay everything off. And this is a situation with one of the women I spoke to. They had cash, they paid everything off, and now they're kind of going, oh, I have not much left in terms of reserves. And this is why it's important to talk to somebody first before taking steps. It's very possible that the steps that are being considered make absolutely sense and are the right things, but it's also likely that they're reactions to this very difficult time of uncertainty, and they may actually block other opportunities from being there that will actually help us be even safer. So in times when one doesn't know what to do, what does one do? And the good news is there's a lot. When we're triggered into fear, we can't think of very much.
Yeah.
I know that one of the things was, keep it simple, even if it means cleaning the kitchen counters off or making a good meal or going for a walk. In Moscow, I did a little laundry each day. It gave me a feeling of accomplishment in the midst of this time where I felt like my hands are kind of tied. And I hate that feeling. I'm not a person who does well with that feeling.
I don't know many people who are, really.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I got that done. Reach out for help. Think about those in your circle who appear to be weathering this time relatively well. And ask how they are doing it. I know one of the things that I noticed with my mom who's living with us now, what I noticed is right after the first week, even though it is a delight to have her, I went, my goodness, from morning till night, it feels like every minute is taken up with making sure somebody or something else is okay. And what I've instated are 2 things, actually. One is I've put daily meditation back into my life and made sure to schedule that in just like any other appointment. And the other thing is, which I learned with my first marriage to David, but is also to ask my husband, this is all the stuff I think I have to get done. I reach out to him for help. What is your opinion on whether I need to get all these 14 things done before I can rest? And guess what he says, Eric, most of the time?
Yeah, about half that.
He even says, just do this one thing. Go out and exercise. Just go exercise.
Yeah.
Because he asked me what are the things on my list. It'll all be there tomorrow. And the thing is with reaching out for help, it's risky to reach out for help because then you're going to hear what other people think. But if you're reaching out to people who you trust and care about and know they trust and care about you, it's also following what they say.
Yes.
So we can all get advice, but how willing are we to take the advice? So get the professional and personal assistance you need and try it out in little baby steps even. I love this one that I heard recently, and I love this. Consider how you want to be described if you look back on this particular difficult time of 2020. How would you think other people might describe how you acted and what you did? And as part of it, consider other times in your life when you've gone through difficult times. Eric, I know this is not your first time of uncertainty. Nope. And you go back and you say, okay, what worked that other time? What was good? Who helped me? What things? Like I go back to that time in Moscow and it was about routine. It was about get up, eat the meal, do some laundry, find out when you can go see David, come back, deal with whatever nightmarish administrative stuff was going on, whether it was with the insurance, credit card, embassy, whatever. Take a walk. I had to take my walks very close to the embassy because I did not to the embassy, to the clinic, because I didn't have a visa. And if I got picked up, that would have been very bad. But I took a little walk and that helped me through. I hope you can also look back on your 2020, a time of much tumult, challenge, and uncertainty, and know that you did what you needed to do to be proud of the decisions you made and what good care you took of yourself. There's many options if one reaches out for help in making these decisions. So if you're not sure what your options are, you're welcome to reach out to us at Gates Pass Advisors. We have a contact us button at gatespassadvisors.com. We have written content there. We have video content there. Podcasts are there. A lot of information. And sometimes that's a bad thing because there's too much for, I would say start with the videos because they're like a minute and a half long, really brief videos about helping with decision making. So you can always reach out and ask for help from us.
Esther, I want to thank you for being very open and very vulnerable with your story. And that's, I mean, I know that you've shared this story before. You've never done it to this depth on the podcast before. And my chest was getting tight, right? As you're talking and saying these things, I'm like, oh God, I'm feeling the pain. I mean, not even close to what you were feeling, but I'm like, the uncertainty and just knowing what that might have felt like. I mean, that was terrible. And so thank you so much for sharing that and being vulnerable and doing that. And I appreciate you putting out the contact information for people to get a hold of you. And on the website, I know there's places to find other podcasts that Esther has done, and you'll get to know her personality even more by listening to some of those. So this is your first one. Make sure you're listening to some of those as well. And then schedule an appointment. Sit down with her, whether it's virtually or in the office, and just have a conversation because you won't regret it. She's an amazing person, and I'm not just saying that because we work together. I'm saying that because it's true. And as you learn more about her and hear more from her podcast, you'll understand this is exactly who she is. She's willing to share and willing to help anybody at any time. So Esther, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Eric. You know, that's what we're all dealing with. This isn't just a time for dollars and cents, though that's critical too. It's a time where we are available to provide personal support as we each walk through this a day at a time until it is resolved. And it will be resolved. But until then, please reach out.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you, the listening audience, for tuning in and listening to the Women in Wealth podcast with Esther Szabo. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Esther comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Gates Pass Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Women and Wealth podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you receive notifications of new podcasts as they become available. Check out the website at www.gatespassadvisors.com for more information. This content is developed from sources believed to be providing accurate information. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. The opinions expressed and material provided are for general information and should not be considered a solicitation for the purchase or sale of any security.